Shalom Aleichem. Reviewing the Kut Sichas, volume Chavches 28, the Sicha number 1 for Balak. So, Torah tells us Balak came to curse the Jewish people. It turned into blessings. We all know the story. Tremendous blessings. Initially, Hashem or the Malach told him not to go, so he waited overnight, and then he asked again, and eventually they said, if you want to go, you can go. And the Torah says, Bilam arose early in the morning, and he saddled his donkey, and he went. Says Rashi, this is the verse on the top, Bilam arose early in the morning and saddled his donkey, and he went to go do the evil plot, the evil mission. Says Rashi, and he quotes from the verse, and he saddled his donkey. Says Rashi, from here we learn that hatred violates convention. The language of Rashi is sino mikalkeles hashura. You could literally translate it, hatred violates the line. There's a certain line, a certain convention of behavior. A person of such stature should not go saddle his own donkey. And here, he woke up in the morning and he saddled his own donkey, which is extraordinarily unusual because hatred violates convention. When I have so much hate, the convention goes out the window and I cross all the lines. I don't care what happens. Mikalkeles hashura, we cross the lines. Said God, wicked one, their father Abraham already preceded you. He beat you to it, as you might say, as the verse says. Avraham arose early in the morning and saddled his donkey. When Hashem told Avraham to take Yitzchak to the Akedah, what does it say? Vayashkem Avraham baboker. Avraham woke up early in the morning. Vayachavosh esasono. He saddled his donkey. And he too was a very wealthy person, an influential person. He had many servants, and it was not becoming of him to saddle his own donkey. And yet suddenly, because it was a mission from Hashem, he didn't look for other people. He did it himself. And therefore, you need to know that if you think your hatred is so powerful and you're able to violate convention, you should know that Avraham beat you to it. Avraham beat you to it because he woke up in the morning and he saddled his own donkey. That is the language of Rashi. So the Rebbe comes along and the Rebbe is going to ask two questions, which we're going to analyze with the other details on this screen. The first question the Rebbe asks is, how is hatred impressive? What is he saying? Rashi is clearly saying that Bilam gets up early and saddles his own donkey to make some kind of impression on Hashem. Now look how much I hate them. I'm really ready to violate convention and do it myself. Says God, I'm not impressed. Avram beat you to it. And he also saddled his own donkey. He violated convention in a good way for his love for Hashem. So therefore Hashem says, I'm not impressed. And says the Rebbe, how is hatred impressive? Like, what was he thinking? What was he thinking? He gets up in the morning and saddles his own donkey, does something unconventional. He breaks all the rules to show how much he hates the Jews, and this is going to impress Hashem? And Hashem says, I'm not impressed. Avraham beat you to it. Like, why would that be even a thought? What's his thinking? And the Rebbe is going to show us that there's three sources in Torah Shebaal Peh, in classic oral Torah, the Medrash and the Gemara, where this conversation appears, this idea appears, albeit with important differences from the way Rashi quotes it. You're going to see on the screen A, B, and C. There's one Medrash here in Bamidbar and Balak, there's another Gemara, and then there's a Medrash back in Bereshis by Avram. All three banter around the same theme, but when the Rebbe takes a look at it, as the Rebbe teaches us how to, with a little bit of care, we see that Rashi does not quote not A, nor B, nor C. He makes up a new one, which is really a hybrid of a few of them. And in those sources, A, B, and C, we don't have the Rebbe's question, as we will see. How is hatred impressive? Because it's not hatred in those sources that Bilam is trying to use to impress. Let's go through them one by one. This is the Medrash right here in Bamidbar on this parsha. And the Medrash says, right on the same verse, Bilam woke up in the morning and he saddled his donkey. Says the Medrash, he arose with alacrity, zirizus. The language vayashkim, rising early in the morning, means he got up early, he wasn't lazy, he wasn't lethargic, he was alacritous, he was moving quickly. Says God, Avram, their father, preceded you to bind his son Isaac. And the pasuk there says, Avram arose early in the morning and saddled his donkey. So you might say, what do you mean? This is the source of Rashi. Rashi seems to say the same thing as the Medrash. What does the Medrash say? Bilam is impressing God with his alacrity. Look, I got up early. I didn't sit around. I'm running. And Rashi is saying the same thing, but he's not. Rashi is saying that Bilam is trying to impress God with his hate. Rashi mentions nothing about alacrity. Nowhere in Rashi does it mention that Bilam is saying, I went early, I woke up, I was alacritous, nothing. It's all Bilam's argument, Bilam's presentation to Hashem is, look how much I could hate. You should be impressed. Like, why is that impressive? The Medrash, which seems to be Rashi's source, speaks about impressing God with alacrity. That makes sense. The Rebbe has a small discussion in the Sicha. Even how does that make sense? Why would Hashem be impressed that he has alacrity to go do a terrible thing? But the Rebbe deals with it, and the Rebbe says, well, maybe the impressive part of it is that in the end, Hashem told him, if he's coming to invite you, you know what, go. So he can argue, okay, once Hashem told me to go, so I'm sort of going by Hashem's command in a warped way. Maybe he's translating it as a mitzvah. So maybe the alacrity shows, some kind of commitment to Hashem, or the Rebbe says another way. Alternatively, the alacrity shows a sense of abandonment, that he's not afraid to the danger that he's going into because he's so committed. And sometimes that, in a weird way, might elicit God's response, etc., a warped mirror concept to the concept of Mesiras Nefesh, which is a holy commitment with abandonment. Here, Bilam is arguing, look, I'm abandoning all chances and I'm doing this because I have to do this, etc. Whichever way you slice it, the Rebbe struggles even with that Medrash, but you can make some sense of it. The concept being, he is saying, look, I'm alacritous, I'm excited, I'm not lethargic. Hashem says, go, and I'm moving. That makes sense. And Hashem says, too late, Abraham beat you to it. But at least you understand the conversation. In the parentheses after each one of these sources, I'm giving the details of that particular source. He's trying to impress God with alacrity. But in the Rashi, he's impressing God with his hate. There's no mention of alacrity. In fact, even in the Dibur HaMaschil, the opening words of Rashi from which he quotes from the verse, the Rebbe says that this is always very telling. The words from the verse which Rashi quotes, upon which he writes his comment and his entry, those words are very telling because they represent what he's trying to explain, which words in the verse he's basing it on, and he's trying to resolve or clarify. And the Rashi doesn't quote the words, Bilam arose in the morning and saddled his donkey, which would say, look, he's alacritous. Rashi simply quotes and he saddled his donkey. He's only focusing on that part, and the fact that he violated convention with his hatred. So how is he impressing God? So the Medrash right there in Bamidbar, which would seem to be the source of Rashi, is not the source at all. And then the Rebbe says, when you study other places, there's another Gemara, another Medrash, B and C, and they too can't be the source of this Rashi. And it remains curious, why would Rashi deviate from the sources? Let's look at B. The Gemara says that love nullifies convention, as we see by Abraham. Hate nullifies convention, as we see by Bilam. That's the language of the Gemara. It brings down the verses that love nullifies convention by Avram because it says that he saddled his own donkey, even though he was such a wealthy person. He did it himself. You see that? Love nullifies convention. Hate nullifies convention, we see by Bilam, because he saddled his own donkey. So the Rebbe, why is the Rebbe quoting these sources? Because this source B has something in common with our Rashi that source A does not. in that source B speaks of the comparison of Avram to Bilam vis-a-vis hate, nullifying convention, or love. Whereas in A, in the source of A, in the Midrash, it only speaks about alacrity. So, maybe this is Rashi's source. However, in this source in the Gemara in B, it doesn't speak anything about impressing God. There's no conversation over here between Bilam and Hashem that Bilam gets up early to show how much his hatred will nullify convention, and Hashem responds and says, I'm not impressed, Avraham beat you to it. There's none of that in the Gemara. The Gemara simply makes a statement. So the Gemara doesn't interpret this story, this particular thing with the saddling of the donkey early in the morning, as representing an act from Bilam trying to make an impression and Hashem responding with Avraham and saying it's too late. The Gemara doesn't have any of that. The Gemara is simply saying a statement of fact. It's observing. Look how love can nullify convention, and look how hate can nullify convention. Look by Abraham, look by Bilam. It's not about impressing God, and therefore the Gemara is understood. You don't have the Rebbe's first question on the Gemara, how is hatred impressive? It's not. The Gemara is not speaking about it being impressive. The Gemara is just stating fact that love or hate, both, can help a person defy convention, mekalkel hashura, to cross the lines and of normative behavior, and that's a true fact. But the Gemara is not speaking of any type of conversation between Bilam and Hashem and trying to impress him and Hashem being not impressed. None of that exists. Plus, just interestingly enough, if we're already talking about nuances, in the Gemara the language is hate nullifies convention. Love nullifies convention, not violates. In Rashi, the language is mivateles. Mikalkeles. Ava mikalkeles hashura, sina mikalkeles hashura. Love violates the convention. Hatred violates the convention. Mikalkeles, kilkul, violation, destruction. Whereas in the Gemara, curious enough, and to the Rebbe this is very curious, it says just a different word. Ava mivateles, bittul. It nullifies convention, and hate nullifies convention. So again, this can't be the source of Rashi, and it's curious why Rashi doesn't use that language of mivateles and rather uses the language of mikalkeles. Then we have the third source, the Medrash back in Bereshis. This is source number C. And here, in a sense, it seems closest to Rashi. What does the Medrash say in Bereshis? Again, in Bereshis, this is the Medrash on the discussion that Avram woke up early in the morning. That love violates convention, and hate violates convention. And it brings the verses that Bilam saddled his donkey with his hate. Avram saddled his donkey with his love for Hashem. And the Medrash there says Avram's saddling overrides Bilam's saddling. The language in the Medrash is an interesting language. The language is that Tovei Chavosha V'Tamid Al Chavosha, that the saddling of Avram will come in the place and override the saddling of Bilam. So this seems very close to the Rashi. Why did we rule out A and B that they can't be Rashi's source? Because remember, Rashi's source speaks about he's trying to impress God with hate. In the Medrash Bamidbar, he's impressing God, but with alacrity, not with hate. In the Gemara, there's a discussion about hate, not alacrity, but it's nothing about impressing God. Yeah, the language is hate, not alacrity, so it has something in common, Rashi, with that B source, but it's not mentioning anything but impressing God. Plus, on an aside, it uses nullified instead of violation. When we come here to Medrash C, this is the closest to Rashi. It is about love and hate, which is the language that Rashi uses. It's not about alacrity, it's about love and hate. However, and it is And it also is sort of a contest between Avram and Bilam. You see, in the Gemara in source number 2, there isn't even any discussion about a contest. The Gemara just makes a statement of fact that we see that love violates convention from Avram, hate violates convention from Bilam. But there isn't like a comparison that one will override the other, nothing to it. Whereas in the Medrash speaks of, in C, it speaks about love versus hate, and it does say that one will override the other. So there is a concept of a contest between the two. What does the Medrash say? That Avram's saddling overrides Bilam's saddling. That the fact that Avram came and had such a love for Hashem that he violated convention and did his own saddling, that actually will undo Bilam's power. So we do see it's very, very close to the Rashi. There is a contest between good and bad, between Avram and Bilam. And in both of them, there's a concept that they violate convention, they violate the normatives because of love or hate, and that the love overrides the hate. So that's perfect. It's mamish the Rashi. However, says the Rebbe, but it's not. Because there's no mention there that this was Bilam's intention to impress. The Medrash simply says that the fact that Avram had such a strong love through the saddling on his own to do what Hashem wants, it overrides the terrible hate of Bilam to do something terrible. And therefore it undoes it and overpowers it. But not that this was Bilam's intention in the saddling of the donkey to make a point. Look how much I could hate. No, because in this source seed, Hashem doesn't say to Bilam, wicked one, Avram preceded you. There isn't a conversation back and forth that Bilam is sort of doing something to impress, and Avram and Hashem is answering him, I'm not impressed, Avram beat you to it. There's none of that. So you see how the Rebbe shows us 3 sources. It's almost like each one, you could say that Rashi's source is that one, but not quite. So what's his source? Again, let's go through it. Again, just looking at the parenthesis at the end of each one. Rashi speaks about he's impressing God with hate, and Hashem says it's not going to work because Abraham beat you to it. The first medrash is that it's impressing God with alacrity. That's not Rashi. That's not hate. Alacrity is impressive. Hate, not so much. The Gemara, which does speak about hate, so in a way it's closer to the Rashi source, but it's nothing about impressing God there. It's just stating a fact that hate and love are very powerful, parallelly powerful. When we come to this medrash, this is the closest of all to the Rashi because it's speaking about hate, and it's also speaking about a comparison between Avram and Bilam. One will undo the other, but we don't have a mention of Bilam's intention. There's no conversation, wicked one, their father beat you to it. It's just that, in fact, in spiritual powers, Avram's love was so powerful that it undid the negativity of Bilam, but this was unbeknownst to Bilam. So we still have the Rebbe's first question. What is Rashi? The second question bothers me personally even more. Why does he deviate from all the sources? Why doesn't he just pick A, B, or C? He really has a hybrid of A and C. He really has a hybrid of A and C. It's A in the sense that he is trying to impress God, but not with alacrity, with hatred, which is in C. And then the Rebbe's first question, how is hate impressive? In none of these sources, these classic oral Torah, upon which Rashi is based, in none of them is Bilam consciously coming to the table to impress with hatred. He's not. He's either impressing with alacrity, or his hatred has a certain power that it's overridden, but not that he is consciously aware of impressing with hatred, because that wouldn't be a good argument, even in Bilam's warped mind. So why is Rashi saying something which is not understood? How do we understand the power of hatred to impress Hashem? And why would Rashi use that rather than one of the clear sources? He's almost creating a new version, which combines A and C, or a little bit of A and a little bit of C. Says the Rebbe, the explanation is, and this is mind-blowing how the Rebbe just answers such a difficult question in a very simple and straightforward way. And that is that, remember, Rashi's job is Pshita Shal Mikra, to explain the flow of the verses. His job is not to collect the medrash and all the wonderful things that are written in the oral Torah. As we see a perfect example here, there's a collection of medrashes, and there's some others. But the Rebbe quotes these three, which are, very close to what Rashi's trying to say. We have two medrashes, we have a Gemara. Rashi's job is not to collect all that interesting information and put it in the book. Rashi's job is to help us study the text, and he comments, and only comments when there's a problem with the text which needs clarification, or words in the text which are helping understand the context. The Torah tells us and makes a point that he woke up in the morning and saddled his own donkey. Why would he do it? And I know the Gemara and the Medrash tell us all kinds of things. He had a lot of hate. But why is that important in the simple level, the pshat level of the story? Says the Rebbe, read the entire story. There's a theme in the text. Throughout the story, Bilam is trying to create a kitrug. He's trying to put the Jews in a bad light with Hashem. And for whatever reason, when you put Jews in a bad light with Hashem, Hashem might acquiesce, chas v'shalom. Not that you can twist his arm or fool him, but that's the system that he made, that there is a power given to Klippa, to evil, to the Satan, to those who want to be mekatrik, chas v'shalom, to inspire negative judgment on the Jewish people, chas v'shalom. And why? Why would Hashem have to listen? Because Hashem makes it fear in order to be able to bless the Jewish people even more. And therefore, Bilam, and he's a prophet, as evil as he is, that's how powerful he is prophetically. And he knows that if he can create a kitrug and inspire Hashem's wrath, this will, God forbid, maybe give him a chance to create the opposite of a blessing, because he knows how much Hashem loves the Jewish people, but he'll sneak it in. A kitrug. I mean, we know we even do these things. We don't wear gold on Yom Kippur because we don't want to evoke the golden calf. There's many things we do not to create a kitrug, because for whatever reason, that's a system Hashem made just to make it fair that the powers of negativity can get can get a foot in the door if they create a kitrug. And Bilam did this throughout the entire section. He kept telling the Balak, the king, the evil king, take me to different places, take me to higher mountains, I'll see the people. He turned his face to the Midbar, so Rashi explains, to evoke the sins of the Jews as they did in the Midbar. He turned his face to the Pa'ar to evoke the sin of Pa'ar, which hasn't yet happened, but it will happen, and he knew it's going to happen, etc. His movements, his standing, his spaces, his places, he's doing all kinds of things to remind Hashem of the various sins that the Jewish people did or will do, and therefore try to create a kitrug so he can bring the curses. Says the Rebbe, that's what Rashi is saying by the first thing that Bilam did. Right away, starting with this pattern of creating a kitrug, of creating a negative judgment. How so? He jumps up in the morning and he saddles his donkey. Translation, he did something that violates convention, that breaks all the rules. Aha! What was he doing? He was telling Hashem, you see, the people, you see hatred, I hate them. That's why I'm violating all convention. The people, they must hate you because they violated your convention, your rules. Look at the 40 years in the Midbar, all the different sins the Jews did. There's a whole list. They kept sinning and complaining and kvetching and golden calves. I mean, if you want to make a collection of sins, you could. So Bilam is saying, you know what it means when somebody sins? They're violating convention. Mikalkeles Hashura, they're breaking the line. They're crossing the line. They're not staying in the straight and narrow. Why would somebody break a convention? Because they hate. Just like me, I hate the Jews. I'm breaking convention. And this wasn't trying to impress God how wonderful he is, which is how one reads the Rashi on the face of it. But the Rebbe said that makes no sense. You can impress God with alacrity, maybe. You can't impress God with hatred. How is that impressive? He's not trying to impress God with hatred. The Rebbe is changing this meaning of this Rashi completely. Rather, he's trying to evoke Hashem's wrath on the Jewish people by reminding him that just like his hatred broke all the normative rules, the Jews who broke many rules of Hashem and sinned over and over in different fashions throughout the journey in the desert, they too must hate Hashem. And therefore, he should hate him back. It's brilliant. It's a whole new pshat. It's not just I'm showing how good I am and Avram bests me. That's the pshat in the Medrash A. Look how alacritus I am. Oh, Avram beat me to it. But in Rashi, that's not what he's saying. And the reason is because in Rashi, on the pshat level of the text, why are we suddenly having a contest between Bilam and Avram? Who's more alacritous? And who's more meritorious? And who should get Hashem's attention? And who's more impressive? I mean, this is all nice things, and the Medrash talks about it, and the Gemara talks about it. But in Rashi, why are we suddenly having an impression contest between Avram and Bilam? On the simple pshat level, we know what the narrative is. As the text and Rashi say time and again and yet again. Namely, Bilam is trying to find an in. Hashem is bent on blessing the Jews, and he's trying to find a way, get them on a bad day, take them down to the mountain, make a bunch of sacrifices, turn your face this way, turn your face that way, look at the tents, look at the top, look at the bottom, look at the desert, evoke whatever you could, any type of kitrug or negativity. That's the narrative. That's the pshat. That's the simple flow of what's happening here. Says the Rebbe. That's what the pasuk must mean on the pshat level. When it tells us some useless information on the pshat level that he woke up in the morning and saddled his own donkey. Who cares? Aha, who cares? Hatred breaks convention. So you see, Hashem, the Jews must hate you because they broke your rules. They broke the line. It's extraordinary. Think about it, how out of the box, how the Rebbe reads this pshat. And therefore Rashi is not A, B, or C. Although he has legs to stand on in each, he's not coming up with a whole new concept. All his concepts are rooted in these Midrashim and in the Gemara. But the concept that the meaning here is not about impressing God, but about creating Chatz Shalom, a kitrug, a negative judgment on the Jews. This is original Rashi. Original Rabbi. Now it makes sense. Says Hashem, I'm sorry, wicked one, it's not going to work. You're trying to evoke a kitrug on the Jewish people by telling me they must hate me because they violate me, just like your hate violated convention with your saddling. Avram violated convention with his love for me when he went to do what I asked him to do. And Avram Avim, he's their father. So if you want to know their relationship to me, it's not one of hate, it's actually one of love. Because their father was so filled with love. You know what kind of love? Love that breaks all the conventions. And usually the kids are the father. Inherently, the kids are the father. They have the spiritual DNA, the physical DNA of Avram. Avram's love for Hashem is without limitation. It breaks convention. And that's who the Jewish people are. The fact is that throughout the desert, the Jews did some sins. And pretty much throughout history, there is such a concept that Jews do sins. Yeah, a Jew messes up. It's not really what he wants. He does it by mistake. He has a bad day. The Yetzer Hara forces him. The Rebbe brings in a footnote. His famous Rambam, that if a person sins, he doesn't really mean it. Yes, sin exists. It's not good. But is that what a Jew really does? Does he chas Hashem do it, that he hates Hashem? That's not true. It's just a myth. A Jew loves Hashem. How much? He gets it from his father Avraham, who loves Hashem to the point that he breaks convention. And here too, this is very much rooted, the Rebbe's approach here. It's very much rooted. Again, notice the chidush, the novelty here. Evoking Avram's love for Hashem is not God's way of besting Bilam. Because according to Rashi, there isn't a contest of Bilam versus Avram, because that has nothing to do with Pshat. On the Pshat level, there's a simple question. Could Bilam's behavior evoke a kitrug, a bad judgment on the Jewish people? God forbid, because of the showing that hatred violates convention. Says Hashem, no. Avram shows that love violates convention. But the Rebbe does point out that throughout the entire section, Bilam mentions and alludes to the patriarchs and matriarchs many times over. They become a very big source of the blessings of the Jewish people, as they always are. And we know the Chazal, our sages tell us, that from Bilam's blessings, which came out, we know what his curses were. Ultimately, he was comparing himself to the patriarchs because he saw himself as, this giant spiritualist On the other side, the bad guys. And he always compared himself with Avram. So therefore, it follows that he should try to do this, and Hashem should respond and saying, "Aha! You compare yourself to Avram. It's not going to work. You're trying to show that the Jews hate me. Guess what? This Avram guy that you try to compare yourself to me, he loves me, and he loves me without limitation, that it breaks all convention, and he is their father, Avram Avihan. So therefore, if there's anything they do without convention, if there's any lines that they cross without normative constraints, it's not hate of Hashem, it's love of Hashem." That's how the Rebbe explains the Rashi. Then the Rebbe goes on, the rest of the Sicha. The Rebbe goes on, the Rebbe has a concept that Rashi has wondrous ideas. It's brought down that there's inyanim nifloim in Rashi, even though Rashi is pshat, seemingly, let's call it literal, but in Rashi is many wondrous ideas that are hinted. It's not his main purpose, but between the lines, if we look, we see extraordinary precisions. So the Rebbe now comes along and compares that this idea of love and hate, violating the lines, and violating convention is something that we find 4 places in Rashi. And we also find it in the Medrash and in the Mechilta. We find it by Avram, that he saddled his own donkey, which is violating convention. We find it by Yosef, that he connected his own chariot and hooked it up to go meet his father. Violates convention. Violates the line, same difference. We find it by Bilam, that he saddled his donkey, that hate violates the lines. And we found it by Paroi, that he connected his chariot to pursue the Jewish people after they left on the way to the Yam Suf. That too shows violent convention. These are 4 times in the Torah. Avram and Yosef for the good guys, Bilam and Paroi for the bad guys. And all 4 have something in common. Namely, that person has either love or hate. He violates convention. He does whatever he's got to do. He doesn't care about normatives, about the lines. Says the Rebbe, again, typically Rashi sources are Torah Sheba'al Peh, classic oral Torah, either the Medrash, Mechilta, the Gemara. We find these 4 are mentioned in the Medrash and in the Mechilta, which is a different type of Medrash. And Rashi here too will pick and choose. The Medrash uses the language love violates the lines or convention by all 4. By Avram, love violates the lines. By Yosef, love violates the lines. By Bilam, hate violates the lines. By Paroi, hate violates the lines. We got the message. By the Mechilta, it's also consistent, but it doesn't say this concept. It says a little bit different concept. That he saddled up besimcha, to honor Hashem. The Mechilta says, look, Avram saddled his own donkey. He was such a wealthy man. Forget about it. But it doesn't use the term Ava Mekalkeles Ashura, that love violates the convention, the lines, but rather that he saddled up with joy, because it represents that if you're joyous, I guess Simcha paid its together. If you're joyous, you have no boundaries. He did it with joy because he wanted to honor Hashem. When it comes to Yosef, the Mechilta says the same thing. Chavash b'simcha, that with joy he saddled it up to honor his father. Yosef is connected his chariot. Vayesro Yosef Markafte Vayal Kras Aviv. He did it with joy to honor his father. It doesn't speak about love violating convention. It speaks about joy to honor Hashem or to honor his father. It's interesting. It's a different angle of the same message. When it comes to Bilam, to the bad guys, similarly, the Mechilta doesn't speak about the hate violating lines, but it speaks about saddling up joyously. So they're both consistent. The Medrash is consistent. And what's the difference between these two, though? Why is it even an interesting conversation? They seem to be saying the same thing in different words. The Rebbe says it's not the case. It's not the case. Because, first of all, when you speak about love, when you speak about love or hate violating the lines, that is a negative. When you speak about joy and honor, it's a positive. When you say love violates convention or hate violates convention, you're saying that it has the power to break. It breaks rules. It's not a positive action. It's not a positive decision. It just destroys anything in its way. When you say that he does something joyously to honor Hashem or to honor his father, this is a positive. He wants to do it to give honor. Secondarily, or perhaps the difference that Rebbe says in halacha might be that honoring Hashem or honoring parents and serving Hashem with joy are an obligation, whereas breaking convention is not an obligation. So let's say that according to the Medrash system, that Avraham and Yosef had so much love for Hashem or the father that they did something that violates convention. Nobody could tell you have an obligation to go and lower yourself and lower your dignity and saddle your donkey. No one could say that you have an obligation to do it. It's not conventional to do it. You do it, you're beautiful. You're lefnim b'shuras hadin. You're beyond the call of duty. You cross the line of duty. But nobody could say that there is a responsibility to do it. However, the way the Mechilta speaks of it is speaking about doing something with joy. It's always a mitzvah to do something with joy, especially if it's a mitzvah. And to honor Hashem or to honor your father are clearly a mitzvah. And therefore, one might argue that in the Mechilta, these acts of Avraham and Yosef were actually teaching us a responsibility. You have to do it. Different than the Medrash. When we come to Rashi, Rashi flip-flops. He picks and chooses. By Avram, Rashi says love violates the lines, like the Medrash. By Yosef, he uses the language of the Mechilta, he rushed to honor his father. Similarly, by Bilam, he says hate violates convention, like the Medrash. When it comes to Paro, he doesn't speak about hate, he just says he did it all by himself, which mirrors more the Mechilta. And the rationale would be, you see, when we say that Bilam's hate is violating the lines, I mean, there was no value to doing it himself, whereas Paro wasn't just without rationale, a destructive act. I don't care about my dignity. It was abandonment of my dignity. No, by Paro, he did it himself. The Rebbe says there was a rationale. He wanted the people to follow suit. And by showing an example that he's ready to go in the front, they followed him. Which that would be how we would read the Mechilta saddled up joyously. It's a constructive act rather than just a breaking of convention. So why does the Rashi pick and choose back and forth? Says the Rebbe that this fits exactly what we said earlier. We said earlier that according to this Rashi, this is not just a contest that the Torah is trying to show us. That Bilam's trying to show his prowess, and Hashem shows Avram's prowess. Like, how does that have to do with Pshat? Like, why is that important? On a Midrashic level, maybe, but on a Rashi, on a simple level of text, what's the meaning? So the Rebbe says, what does it mean on a Pshat level? What is Rashi teaching us? It's about breaking convention. Because the whole idea is that he's trying to create a kitrug. He's trying to create, putting the Jewish people, God forbid, in a negative light, in a judgmental light, chas v'shalom, for Hashem. That's what these narratives are about, according to Rashi, says the Rebbe. And therefore, although by the case of Yosef and Paro, Rashi chooses to say that these acts were actually constructive and obligations. They were not something that was outlandish and undignified and breaking convention. They were actually responsible things to do at honor the father. Rashi chooses that Yosef didn't do something because he lost his head and he's breaking all normatives. He rushing to honor his father. He wants to do a mitzvah. The same thing, Paro taking his own chariot. There's no reason to believe that he lost his head and he just wanted to show his hatred was so strong. No, he did it with with an argument, with a rationale, so that the people will follow him, the army will follow him, as Rashi himself points out there. However, when it comes to the other two, when it comes to Avram and Bilam, Rashi deviates. My understanding is that on a simple level of pshat, the Mechilta makes more sense. It makes much more sense to say that a person is doing something for a reason. However, but it being that by the case of Bilam, the only way to explain why the Torah tells us on the pshat level that Bilam saddled his own donkey is because he's trying to create a kitrug, a negative judgment of the Jews. And how so? By saying, look, I'm breaking convention out of hate. The Jews must hate you because they broke your rules. So therefore Rashi has to go in that direction. By Bilam, and therefore also by Avram, because one is going to mirror the other. Rebbe says, look at the precision. Rashi says, from here we know, right? Look at the top line on the screen. From here we know that hatred violates the lines. Points out the Rebbe. We learned this from Bilam. We don't know it yet from Paro. There is already a Rashi on Paro. That when Paro connected his own chariot, it says Rashi, Hu Bayatzmo, he did it all by himself. So shouldn't that already be the source for the concept that hatred violates lines? No. Says Rashi, Mikan, from here we learned that. We don't know it until Bamidbar. Because when Paro did it, he likely did it for a very rational reason. It wasn't about breaking any lines. Where do we learn the concept that hate violates lines? From here. Again, because this is in line with the way the Rebbe explained the Rashi's pshat. Also notice that Rashi omits the binding of his son Isaac. Look at the Rashi. That Hashem said to him, wicked one, their father Abraham got ahead of you, preceded you. He rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey. Doesn't say anything about binding his son Isaac. The Medrash, which is arguably Rashi's source, does say it. Why does Rashi cut it short? And the answer would be, and this is in Yonim Nufloim, the Rebbe says, this is, you see, wondrous minutiae in Rashi. It's beyond the pshat level of Rashi, but the minutiae is there and it lines up with pshat. Why would Rashi cut that short? Especially the Medrash is his source. The Medrash says he woke up early in the morning and saddled his donkey to take his son to the binding. The answer is, when you say he's taking his son to the binding, that means he has a mitzvah. It doesn't yet show the emphasis of doing something that breaks lines. Hashem told him to take his son to the binding. He has a mitzvah. So it's no longer breaking a line. It's actually a responsibility. When you have a mitzvah, you have to do it joyously, which would be like the Mechilta approach, if you will. You have to do it. It's not like an extra credit. It's basic. It's nice, but it's basic. Rashi cuts that out. It's the emphasis here is not the point. He cuts short from the Medrash, which is his own source. The point here is not to point out that Avram went to do what Hashem wants. That's obvious. Hashem tells him to do something, he's going to do it. But it shows something else completely. It shows the concept that he broke all normatives by saddling his own donkey, because here the conversation on the Rashi level is all about breaking, violating the lines, which was Bilam's attempt to show that the Jews hate Hashem, and Hashem's answer that really the Jews love Hashem. Because in both cases, we're breaking lines, we're violating convention. And to show that, we don't bring in that he's doing it to do a mitzvah. That wouldn't be a violation of convention. That would be a responsibility. Hashem give you a mitzvah, of course you can do it quick. So Rashi omits the message of binding of the Isaac. It's not about the alacrity and about anything to do with the mitzvah. It's just about the fact that he went and saddled his own donkey because of his love for Hashem, which will be the response and the whitewashing and washing away of the kitrug, of the attempted negative judgment of Bilam. And then the Rebbe brings in from Chassidus. The Rebbe brings it, the Alter Rebbe says famously that Rashi has in it also what's called Yena Shel Torah, the wine of Torah, which is Chassidus. That even though Rashi is pshat, but there's in it embedded tremendous hints of Chassidus. And the Rebbe shows us how to uncover it, or uncovers it for us. And the Rebbe says like this. There's a theme in this portion. The overriding theme is transformation of curses to blessings. That's what happened throughout the whole story. And we have it again in Dvarim, in the portion of Kitetse, when Hashem, when it's recounted, when Moshe Rabbeinu recounts what the Jewish people did with Bilam and how he was hired to curse them. But Hashem did not acquiesce. He did not want to listen to Bilam. But Hashem transformed his curses to blessings because he loves you. Apparently, this is a very important verse. We're coming up at Yom Kippur, we say it at the end of the Hataras Nedarim, that apparently this idea of curses being transformed to blessing, and why? Because Hashem loves you. And this is a central theme in the story of Bilam. Is hapcha. Take the negative, turn it over. Take the curse, make it into a brach. Says the Rebbe, let's now understand, based on what we just said, that the takeaway and application of this in our service of Hashem for each of us. What? The service of Hashem, we know the principle is, what does it mean, Avodas Hashem? There's two parts. Sur merav asei tov. Go away from bad and do good. Right? Negative commandments, positive commandments. Keep the Yetzer Hara and the bad stuff in check. Get away from that and embrace the mitzvahs. That's basically the two-step program of Judaism in a nutshell. And it's brought down, says the Rebbe. So the first takeaway would be, if we're speaking about those two counterparts, get away from bad and do good, that a Jew's love for Hashem mirrors his hatred for evil. This is a subject discussed a lot in Tanya. The language is that what? At the level of a person's despises sin will mirror the level of love of Hashem. We know that in Avodas Hashem, in the love of Hashem, there's simple love, and there's what's called avarabba. A person could love Hashem without any limitation. For us, this is good words, but people, tzaddikim, or high-level people understand it or experience it, but we could study it too, I guess. That there's regular love of Hashem, and then there's love. Forget about avarabba. He loves Hashem without any limitation. And that's what Yiddishkeit and Chassidus wants of us, to try to experience at times that greater love without any limit. There's nothing I won't do, like maybe b'chol miyadecha, without any limit. Says the Rebbe, take a look at this Rashi. Bilam's hatred has no limit. Remember, what's the language over here in the Rashi? Mekalkeles hashura. It breaks all the lines. And Avram's love, Ava mekalkeles hashura, his love breaks all the lines. What's the message? That Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, are empowered. And how? As Rashi says, Avram Aviyem. From the love that we get from our father Avram, whose love broke all the lines, that Yidden love Hashem without limitation. We are empowered. The Rebbe always spoke to us as if we're capable of connecting to these highest levels. I think he knew us very, very well. But at the same time, I think he also empowered us, by sticking to his program, that somehow we access these very high levels because we have such a great Rebbe. And just by connecting with his program, in a sense, we're connected to it, and deep down we have it. I don't know. But the Rebbe is saying, what do Jews have in terms of Avodas Hashem? Not just regular. They have B'Yerusha, they have inheritance from Abraham, love of Hashem. You know what kind of love? A love that breaks the lines. You know how much they hate evil? The sin of Bilam, the hatred of Bilam, which in Hasidic terms would be hatred of sin. Mikalkeles Hashura, a hatred that crosses all the lines. They hate it without limit. They despise sin. In a strong way, in a very high way of b'chol moedech without limitation. And then the Rebbe says, number two, this tremendous love that the Yidden have for Hashem, tremendous, and tremendous hate that they have to sin. This doesn't just apply to them, but it also applies in terms of their service of Hashem, the way they impact the world. Where is this hinted? Because both this love and this hate of Avram and Bilam are expressed in the donkey. Avram saddled his donkey, and Bilam saddled his donkey. Why, of all things that have to be expressed, this love and this hate, this extraordinary love and extraordinary hate, with donkey saddling? The answer is because in Chassidus, donkey saddling is a very big deal. The word donkey means chamer, chamer means chomer, materialism. Avram's got a donkey and Bilam's got a donkey. Avram has materialism that represents the physical body of a Jew. It represents also material things within the world that are kosher. Bilam has a donkey too, And that represents material things, chaymer, chamor, donkey, material things that are bilam-like, that are prohibited, that are treif, behaviors and actions and what have you, or things that are just inherently unkosher. And therefore we say that Avram's donkey, this becomes very poetic and very interesting. That Avram's donkey represents the love that Abraham has to saddle his own donkey. He conquers the physicality of the body, which is the donkey, the physical, chomer, and all things that are permissible. It's Abraham's donkey. Translation, it's permissible. And the Rebbe brings from the Shach, one of the commentaries on the Torah, that saddling, vayachavish, can also be kovish, to conquer, even though one has a chaf and one has a ches, but the Shach on the Torah, the commentary, famous commentary, explains that there's a connection. To saddle means to conquer, to sort of to rein it in, and therefore Avram saddles his donkey. The Jewish people, Hashem's children, they conquer, they rein in, they saddle their own animal soul and body, and everything in the world that they encounter that's acceptable, that's kosher. That's Avram-like in the sense. It's Avram's donkey-like because it's, in a sense, it's kosher and it's acceptable and it could be used. It's not a sin. And they do it, and they saddle it with love of Hashem. They use it for Kedusha. That's what we do with things that are neutral. Elevate them. They eat the food so you can have a mitzvah, you can have energy to do a mitzvah. To elevate that to the love of Hashem. To the tremendous love that we talked about in number 1, a love that defies convention, that's beyond limit. Where when it comes to Bilam's donkey, translation, when it comes to anything physical that looks like Bilam, meaning it's treif, it's unkosher, it's a sin, it's not something that's neutral that could be elevated. This, they hate it. They reject it completely. So again, we're seeing how the counterparts work, which is in line with the theme of the parsha on the face of it, that he gives a curse, Hashem makes it into a blessing, and that transformation is very important. Now, according to Rashi, we have a whole Maimer Chassidus, we have a whole wine of Torah, a whole Chassidic discourse here, that the hate and the love violate convention. Because as we said in the Rashi, the emphasis, the violation, the kilkel of crossing any lines, according to Chassidus, that comes home very strong. We break any lines. We don't just have love. We have love to the nth degree. Avarabba, b'chol meodecha, with all your might. We don't just have a hate of sin and negativity and evil. We despise it completely. We have no use for it. I mean, this is the level of a tzaddik, but the Rebbe is talking to us about it. And we impact even our donkey, our materialism, accordingly. And then the Rebbe, at the end of the Sicha, says, even that is not enough, you see. What we did here was, we showed that the two mirror each other, the hate of Bilam and the love of Avraham. In the Hasidic terms, my love of Hashem was without limit, my despising of Klipa, of unholiness, is without limit. My love of Hashem is that I'm going to elevate all the donkey, all the physicality, and my despising of Klipa is that I will reject all the physicality. So they're parallel, but they're not quite transformative. You can't say that the good transformed the evil. He just mirrored it. He maybe seesawed it. But there's a concept in Chassidus that when a person does a very, very strong teshuvah, which this is also a very high level, but the Rebbe also sort of indicated that in our generation, because we have such a Rebbe, we are, that's not the Rebbe's words, but that's the Rebbe's message, we're capable of accessing the highest level of teshuvah just because we're connecting to that giant neshama and to his program. And therefore the Rebbe spoke a lot about teshuvah ilah. We're in the time of the year of tshuva. The Rebbe wasn't so interested in tshuva tata, fixing sins, even though he knew that we could do plenty of that. But the Rebbe's emphasis when he spoke to us about tshuva is tshuva ilah. Tshuva like a tzaddik, because ultimately the Rebbe said that Yid is really a tzaddik, and he was elevating us. He was trying to help us see ourselves the way he sees us, etc. Whatever the explanation is in that, but that's clearly what the Rebbe did for many, many years and throughout really the whole Nesias. So in this context, this idea, where would you find that Bilam is transformed to Avraham? That hate and sin and curse is transformed to blessing in terms of Avodas Hashem. So far in 1 and 2 we didn't do it. We just show that they parallel. But in 3, the Rebbe does it at the end of the Sicha. Namely, that even if a person sinned, he sinned. He created something that's not redeemable. Through tshuva, meyava, the greater level tshuva that's out of love, the sin becomes a mitzvah. If a person does a sin and he does tshuva, if he does a lower tshuva, the sin becomes considered an accident. But if he does tshuva meyava, tshuva out of love, the language is doinis nasa kazachis, the sin becomes a merit. And it's explained, says the Rebbe, that this is in a way a greater accomplishment than a person who never sinned. This is not something that you could do by choice. You can't plan on this, God forbid. I'm going to sin so that I can do tshuva and I'll have a greater accomplishment. That's terrible. We don't do that. That's not okay. But after the fact, when a person just does mitzvahs, they can only elevate kosher things. Things that are unkosher, they can never elevate them because they're not elevatable. However, a person, God forbid, like most of us, normal people, not tzaddikim, who experience sin, experience real klipa, and if you do real tshuva, which the Rebbe is empowering us to do, that sin becomes a mitzvah. So you elevated klipa. You didn't just elevate neutral things that are kosher. Non-kosher, forget about it, became a mitzvah, which is fantastic. The Rebbe is speaking to a generation of so many Bali Tshuva, and all of us are trying to be Bali Tshuva. That you ate treif, good, you did tshuva, and now treif became a mitzvah. You can't do that if you hadn't eaten treif. Again, this is, I think all of us can relate to this, even if we're not officially called Bali Tshuva, we all can relate to it because Baruch Hashem, we've all sinned. And then we turn around and the Rebbe empowers us to do tshuva and do tshuva at that higher level. And that would be a real transformation. The sin, the hate, the curse becomes a blessing. The despising of klipa, the klipa becomes kedusha. And this is an extraordinary transformation of which is really what the theme of the parsha is. And the Rebbe says, take a look at the beauty of this. That right at the, now that we understand what's really happening in the Hasidic level, from the Rashi, which is really the face value, if you will, of the text. Now when you read the parsha, step back. What's the first thing that the Torah tells us? Balaam is coming, and he's going to try to get the Jews to get punished, and try to get the Jews to sin, and try to make them hated by Hashem, and try to say that they hate Hashem, God forbid, and all that stuff. What's the first thing that happens? He saddles his donkey, and he tries to evoke that kitrug, that hatred, and the first thing that he evokes is Hashem's love. The first thing that he does is he evokes Hashem's love, which is really what the rest of the story is. Ki ha'heifcha Hashem alekecha, that he loves you and he showers them with all these blessings which are unimaginable, which are clearly a direct result of Hashem's love.